Loading in. Welcome. I'm glad everybody could make it tonight. Sorry for the delay. I had a little bit of a Zoom whoopsie last time, but my name is Matt Holland. I'm the program and volunteer coordinator at the Buffalo History Museum. And we have a really special program for you tonight. We have our very own Cynthia Van Ness, the director of our library, here to talk about Buffalo's political figures and researching and collections. Just a little bit of a ground rule though. We're going to do Q&A in the end. And so if you would like to ask a question along the way or at the end, using the Q&A function is fine. I'll try to keep track of the chat tab too. But just feel free to ask and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can by the end. Also, if there's any sort of issues with technical difficulties, we are filming it, so we'll be able to provide that later on for those of you that would like to watch it, or if you know somebody that registered and wants to watch it, or somebody that hasn't, it'll be up on our YouTube page. So anyways, without further ado, I will hand it over to Cynthia.
Hi, everybody. See some names I recognize. My name's Cynthia Van Ness. I'm director of the Library and Archives here at the Buffalo History Museum, coming to you live from my dining room. So as you know, our talk tonight is on Buffalo's presidential figures. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we're going to jump right into it. And coming up right now. There we go. Buffalo's political figures. You may recognize all of these pictures. Our subjects today, I thought I would put their birth and death dates down so we can put them in context. Shirley Chisholm, of course, largely a 20th century figure, and Belva Lockwood and Grover Cleveland, who were very close contemporaries of each other, both born in the 1830s and died within a few years of each other. I love this picture of Shirley Chisholm. This was actually taken in Buffalo in 1980. This is a picture from our collection. Little background on her, for those who need a refresher. She was born Shirley Anita St. Hill in 1924 in Brooklyn. She graduated from Brooklyn College with a BA in 1946 and got a job either directing a daycare center or a nursery school. I've heard it described both ways. Then she got a master's degree from Columbia University Teachers College, 1952. And in 1960, she jumped into politics and became the co-founder of the Unity Democratic Club in New York City. From there, as a springboard, she was elected to the New York State Legislature. Then in 1968, she was the first African-American woman elected to Congress, representing New York's 12th district. And as we know, she was the first African-American to run for president in 1972. I have to tell you, I'm old enough to tell you this, that at some point during that presidential campaign, she came to Rochester, New York, where I grew up. I was a kid, and my parents took us to hear her speak. I don't have a real strong memory of it, but my older sister does. So I was in the audience once when she spoke around here. A few more important events in Shirley Chisholm's life. In 1976, she built a house in Williamsville with former state assembly member Arthur Hardwick, but she also kept an apartment in Washington for legislative business. Then in 1977, she and Arthur Hardwick got married. In 1983, she settled in Williamsville full-time with Arthur Hardwick after she retired. Unfortunately, he died in 1986, so they only had a few years together in their retirement. And he is entombed in a crypt called Birchwood Mausoleum in Forest Lawn Cemetery. In 2005, Shirley Chisholm died in Florida, but her remains were brought back here, and she is interred with Arthur Hardwick in Forest Lawn Cemetery in Birchwood Mausoleum. In 2014, the U.S. Postal Service issued a stamp in her honor, and in 2017, her portrait was added to Buffalo's Freedom Wall on East Ferry Street. So here's a nice picture of Shirley with Arthur Hardwick. He's the tallest man in the photo. This was taken at an NAACP dinner at the Statler Hotel in Buffalo in 1966. Gentleman on the right is Joseph Krangle, who was the Democratic Party chairman at the time. So one of the things you're seeing here, newspaper clippings from our Ready reference file. Our Ready reference collection is a set of file cabinets with folders of articles and clippings on things we get asked about a lot, things for which there isn't necessarily a book written that we can just sort of pull off the shelf. So we keep folders and clippings on any number of popular topics in Buffalo. So from that Ready reference folder on Shirley Chisholm, we have this one clipping showing a view of the house in 1976. Apparently that brick wall in the foreground that they put up was not compliant with Amherst code. So they did what I don't know what the issue was, but they did comply and they modified their brick wall. So when I was preparing for this talk, I thought, I don't have her autobiography in our collection. I should see if I can get a first edition. So I start looking at used, rare, and out of print book sites, and I'm seeing that the first edition is going for $400 or $500. I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a little out of our price range. But I found one that the dealer had described it as, 1972. Now, okay, that's the year her autobiography came out. Maybe it's like, the 9th or 10th printing or something like that. And it was only $50. So I thought, oh, it's got this nice sort of wear and tear. The book has been loved. I ponied up, I ordered it, it arrived, and right inside on the reverse of the title page, here it is, first printing. I don't know if you can make that out. The contrast isn't great. So I think we now have a first edition of Shirley Chisholm's autobiography. So this will be cataloged and will be findable in our catalog at some point. Thought nice to see the picture of her Freedom Wall on East Ferry Street. The artist was John Baker, and of course this was a project commissioned by the Albright Knox in collaboration with Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority, and that's a photo by my friend Chuck Lacusa from BuffaloAH.com. So where are Shirley Chisholm's papers? I found them at Rutgers University. They've been there since at least 2003. It looks like she decided to start parceling these things out during her lifetime. They have 3.7 cubic feet, 8 manuscript boxes, including a photograph box and a newspaper box. So 4.4 cubic feet, they are not digitized or online, so you do need to make an appointment and travel to Rutgers if you want to study her papers. So here's a story from last September. My husband and I were looking for something to do on a Sunday in the height of the pandemic, outdoors, safe and socially distanced. So we took a bike ride in Forest Lawn Cemetery and said, you know what, we have to go find Shirley. I have no idea what mausoleum she's in. Let's go find her. So we just went from one to the next, to the next, to the next, reading all the walls until we found her. And here's her crypt in Birchwood Mausoleum. It was hard to take a picture of it because her crypt is above eye level, so you kind of have to, aim your camera up. And I have to tell you, that beam of light over her name, that is not Photoshop. That is actually the beam of light coming through the window at the moment I aim the camera up there, which is, I think, really nice. So you can see Arthur Hardwick and Shirley are in the same crypt. So let's end with a couple of quotes from her. Unless we start to fight and defeat the enemies in our own country, poverty and racism, and make our talk of equality and opportunity ring true, we are exposed in the eyes of the world as hypocrites when we talk about making people free. This is a speech she gave before the U.S. House of Representatives in 1969. And of course, the classic, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So the next woman in our presentation, Belva Lockwood. This is a portrait in the National Portrait Gallery. So many of you know she was born in Royalton, New York, Niagara County, 1830. At the age of 18, she got married to Uriah McNall, but he died only a few years later after the birth of their daughter, Laura. So here she was a widow with a child to support. So what did she do? She went into teaching, got some teacher training, and eventually rose to become the headmistress of the Lockport Union School as of 1857. Somewhere during her tenure in teaching and being a headmistress, she met Susan B. Anthony, and the two women recognized each other as kindred spirits and became friends and sort of mutual supporters of each other. In 1868, she got married again to Ezekiel Lockwood, but he again died 1877. At this time, she moved to Washington and decided she wanted to go into law. So she applied to the National University School of Law, which is now Georgetown University, had to fight her way in. It took some struggle for them to back down and admit her. In 1879, she became the first woman lawyer to argue a case at the US Supreme Court. That, of course, was also a struggle and a fight. It took a few years to win that privilege. In 1890, she was a delegate to the International Peace Conference. She had a long interest in peace and disarmament. And in 1917, she died and is buried in Washington. Now, her house, the childhood home, no longer stands in Royalton, but there is a historic marker on the site. Here's a picture courtesy of historicmarkerdatabase.com, HMDB. It's a great go-to site when you think you've seen a marker or you want to know where markers are. They try and capture them all. So I thought I would find the first mention of her in a Buffalo newspaper. And here it is, 1874. She has begun her law career. She's described as an attorney at law. She's trying to gain admission to argue at the Court of Claims. The Chief Justice says that the attorneys must be men of good moral character. She argued that Congress should legislate a declaration that the law is not intended to exclude women from the bar. Eventually, she prevailed. She was admitted to argue there. So when she gained admittance to the US Supreme Court, here's what the Buffalo Express had to say in 1879, just one line. Belva Lockwood will be known in history as the first woman to make the United States Supreme Court come down and behave itself. Now it's kind of, a little snarky. I suppose it could be worse. What's interesting about these two clippings is by the time she's making the news, they didn't seem to know that she was sort of Buffalo, Niagara area native. They had no idea of her Niagara County roots. They don't really refer to her as, our local person, our local woman. So we're going to talk about, was she the first woman to run for president? And to answer that question, we need to take a detour and talk about Victoria Woodhull for a moment. So here, of course, is Victoria Woodhull. Looks like a very intelligent woman in this photo. Roughly about the same age as Belva Lockwood. First woman to run for president. She declared her candidacy in 1872, but, and there are a bunch of buts here, she was not old enough at the time to serve. She didn't win any party's nomination, and she didn't appear on any ballots. So she didn't earn any votes. So you can decide for yourself if that is it a presidential candidacy or is it not? Now, Belva Lockwood, on the other hand, she was nominated by the National Equal Rights Party in 1884 and 1888 as the second woman to run for president in the US. She earned about 4,100 votes, I think, in that first election, although she said at the time that there was ballot tampering at many of the polling places. People were submitting ballots with her name on them and they were getting torn up. So chances are good she actually earned more than 4,100 votes. And here's sort of an editorial cartoon from New York Public Library. So who won that 1884 election? As we know, it was Buffalo's own Grover Cleveland. I'm thinking this might be the only election with more than one candidate from the Buffalo Niagara area in the same race. If you know of others, drop them in the chat because this is the only one that I know of. So what do we have on Belva Lockwood in the research library at the museum? We basically have biographies of her. I had two that were fairly old. Niagara County Historical Society put one out in 1969. We have that. 1974, there's another one written, and I thought I really need to get something more up to date. So we ordered one that was published in 2008. So those are the three biographies we have. They're on the shelf. You can visit them in our library. Now, her papers ended up at Swarthmore College in their Peace Collection. That's in Pennsylvania. There are 10.4 linear feet of them. Again, they are not digitized or online, so an in-person visit is needed to study them. I thought you probably have not seen her grave, so here's a picture of her, her tombstone in the Congressional Cemetery in Washington. We'll go out with a couple of quotes from her. This is from one of the first few paragraphs in an essay she wrote in Lippincott's magazine in 1888 called My Efforts to Become a Lawyer, which is online. I also have a printout of it. And I thought, this is just so perfect. She said, I have never been able to enter into the prejudices of centuries past that have had no foundation in reason, in nature, or in nature's laws, nor to discover that the limitations of woman's sphere as heretofore dictated by the customs of society were worthy of serious consideration. That is a mouthful. And of course, this one's just lovely. The glory of each generation is to make its own precedents. We'll go out on that and move on to Grover Cleveland. Here is a carte de visite, or visiting card, from his youth. I figured you'd all seen a bazillion pictures of him as a grown man. You probably haven't seen anything of him as a young man. I think this is the earliest photo we have of him. We don't have any childhood images of him. Major events in Grover Cleveland's life. As a lot of you know, he was born in New Jersey, not a Buffalo native, but he visited his Uncle Lewis Allen on the way to Cleveland, Ohio, and I think that is a family connection, Cleveland, Ohio, named for relatives of Grover Cleveland. Stops to visit his Uncle Lewis Allen and ends up staying here. Some of you will recognize Lewis Allen as the man for whom Allentown and Allen Street are named. And also, he is considered one of the founders of the Buffalo Historical Society, which is now the Buffalo History Museum. So Grover Cleveland was admitted to the New York State Bar in 1859. He did not attend law school because such a thing didn't exist, at least not in Buffalo at that time. If you wanted to become an attorney, you essentially underwent an apprenticeship in the office of someone with an established firm. They would agree to take you on. You would start reading law, is what they called it, studying their law books and starting to handle, maybe progressively more responsible legal matters. And then when you were ready, you would study for the bar, take the test, and if you passed, you were admitted to the bar. So he does not literally have a law degree. In 1870, he was elected sheriff of Erie County. In 1880, mayor of Buffalo. In 1882, governor of New York State. In 1884, president. So that in under 15 years, that is a meteoric rise from sheriff to president. He married Frances Folsom in 1886, making him the only president to have a wedding in the White House during his term. And of course, was voted out and then voted back in 1892, becoming the only president to serve a non-consecutive second term in the White House. In 1908, he passed away and is buried in New Jersey. And I just have to add a postscript about his retirement, his post-White House life. There are a lot of stories about how Grover Cleveland was hanging out in Buffalo at that time. He did not make casual visits to Buffalo. He was pretty much done with the city, happy with his life in New Jersey. He wasn't hopping the train to come up here and go to taverns with people. So there are a lot of stories floating around about Grover Cleveland hanging out here and there, and most of them, if they're from his retirement age, are false. So since you've seen a lot of pictures of Grover Cleveland, I thought I would show you some scenes from buildings from his life. Here is a picture of the Bowen and Rogers Law Office on Erie Street. Maybe it's 1915 when this was taken, maybe earlier. It's not dated, not real sure. This, of course, has since been demolished. The office itself was on the terrace when Grover Cleveland was reporting there. So he may or may not have spent time in this exact building, but it's our only picture of Bowen and Rogers, one of the law firms he worked at. Later on, he worked in the Weed Block at Main and Swan. It also has since been demolished. This is now the site of the Fidelity Trust building. The photo is undated. Like many of us, Grover Cleveland was working from home from this period. I'll say more about that. Here is the interior of his law office. So he had a law office in the Weed Block on one floor, up one flight, northwest corner, as it says, scrawled in handwriting across the bottom of the image. But his rooms where he was boarding were also in the same building. So he was working from home. He'd climb a flight of stairs or two to go from his rooms to his law office. Don't know when this photo was taken, but that's what his law office looked like. northwest corner, I'm sorry to say, is not visible from the Main Street side of the weed block, which is what you're looking at in that previous image. It would have been the rear of that building. So can't point to a window in that picture and say that was Grover Cleveland's law office. So let me show you a chair. And this is an awkward transition, but here we go. So here's a chair from the library. You'll see it kind of has a perforated backboard that says 1876. And it's from Old County Hall. They were donated to us around 1970. I don't have an exact date. And these chairs were in use in Old County Hall. We have them in the library now. Thought we'd show you one of these chairs on site in the mayor's office in Old County Hall. Here's a photograph that dates from around 1896. Again, long after Grover Cleveland's term as mayor, somebody else was mayor at that time. But there's one of the chairs on duty in the mayor's office. There's another version of it on casters up against a desk, and then another version of it close up bottom left corner of the photo. Okay, so here's photographic proof showing that the chairs were on duty in the mayor's office. And some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, why is there a mayor's office in County Hall? Like, those are two separate branches of government, and you're right. When that building opened up in 1876, both the County of Erie and the City of Buffalo had their governmental offices in the same building, making it a really early example of sort of cross-governmental cooperation and collaboration. As you know, then City Hall moved out and built the magnificent Art Deco skyscraper on Niagara Square in the 1930s. But before that, you're looking at the mayor's office in Old County Hall. So here's how we know Grover Cleveland's guests sat in them. Here's a rendering, scenes in Grover Cleveland's office as mayor, from Frank Leslie's Weekly in 1882. We're going to zoom in a little bit here. You'll see there's the chair and there's the other chair showing up in Cleveland's office as mayor. Get a little closer here. Kind of like the artist took some shortcuts, but we're pretty satisfied that the chairs we now have in our library were in Grover Cleveland's office when he was our mayor. So a few more things about Grover Cleveland in our collection if you want to research him. We have pictures from his life in our picture store, and we're going to share links that I have links on this screen, but we're going to share them with you afterwards. You don't have to try and scribble this down in case you want to visit these sites. So put your pencil down. We're going to share the links with you. Our picture store has pictures of him, Francis Folsom, and some scenes from his life. One of the digital projects I did a few years ago, I did a Google map of sites in Buffalo associated with Grover Cleveland, and I color-coded them. So the blue pins represent places that he worked, the red pins represent places where he lived, and the yellow pins represent everything else, like places where he gave speeches or dined or visited or spent leisure time. And if any of those buildings and sites were surviving today, I turned that pin into a star. So again, we're going to share the link with you after the presentation. As it turns out, none of the places where Grover Cleveland lived survive today. There are no Grover Cleveland slept here sites in Buffalo. Another presentation I did is when I started hearing these stories that were appearing in the press. Several claims have been published recently about places where Grover Cleveland lived or liked to hang out. Are they true? I kind of took them apart in the slide presentation again, and we will share the link with you. And a few years back in 2016, we were looking at our presidential material and realized we had Grover Cleveland letters and documents, like, handwritten letters, things with his signature on them in a bunch of different places. And we thought it might be good for what we call intellectual control or bibliographic control to group them all together and inventory them and kind of keep it a little more secure this way. So we actually now have a Grover Cleveland collection that we assembled from existing material in the collection. It is one box, but we will get it out for you if you visit us in person. And we also have a bibliography at WorldCat, which is the giant database of the stuff in the libraries of the world. We contribute to it so that our books and our manuscripts show up when people do searches at WorldCat. So we did a list of all of our Grover Cleveland stuff, and we used WorldCat to do that bibliography. So that'll give you an idea of, well, what do we have in addition to some of those letters and papers? Another thing we have, his presidential papers on microfilm. His presidential papers are in the Library of Congress, but back in the 1960s or so, they microfilmed them all. And we bought a set of the films. So there they are on microfilm, and you're probably thinking, I hate microfilm. There's no way you're going to get me to look at microfilm. And you're right, you don't have to look at microfilm. The Library of Congress, like in the last year, finished digitizing all of that film, which is like thousands and thousands of scans of letters and other documents, and those are now fully online at the Library of Congress. So if you want to dig into his presidential career and you want to see what was going on during, particular episodes during his presidency, you can now do that courtesy of the Library of Congress. Since you probably haven't seen his gravesite, here's a picture of it from the Princeton Cemetery in New Jersey. Francis Folsom is at one side of him. I can't exactly tell who's on the other side of him. So let's end with a couple of quotes from Grover Cleveland. As it turns out, he was opposed to women's suffrage, and so was Francis Folsom Cleveland. He says, sensible and responsible women don't want to vote. The relative positions to be assumed by men and women in the working out of our civilization were assigned long ago by a higher intelligence than ours. On the other hand, he supported the labor movement. And he says, the laboring classes constitute the main part of our population. They should be protected in their efforts peaceably to assert their rights when endangered by aggregated capital. That all statutes on this subject should recognize the care of the state for honest toil and be framed with a view of improving the condition of the working man. So that concludes my talk for today. Grab our email address if you want to reach out privately. And I'm going to stop the screen sharing, go back to viewing with Matthew, and we'll start getting some of your questions.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, now's your time. Feel free to type those in.
Drop them in the chat or in the Q&A.
Yeah, and we'll check them out. We don't have any preloaded, so yeah, just feel free to ask. I'll keep my eye over here on the chat screen.
No takers yet.
No.
Is there anything anybody felt like I left out of the presentation? Like you're expected to hear something about Cleveland or Chisholm or Belva Lockwood that I didn't cover? Because that's the sort of thing we will follow up on if that's the case.
Not seeing anything.
Okay.
All right. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. I think that's good. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for that presentation. That was really fun. And it's great to see what we have at the resource center, or at the library, I should say, and just what's available on this topic, which is so important. So thanks so much for being able to spend your time with us and share that with us.
Feedback coming in. So thanks, everybody. Can't wait to see the 5 urban myths. We will definitely going to compile basically a nice sheet with all of the links that I used in the presentation and get that out sometime around this time as we get the YouTube.
We do have some Q&A coming in.
Okay.
All right. So so how long did Shirley Chisholm live in Western New York? That's one question.
So she moved here in 1977. And then at some point after Arthur Hardwick's death, she ends up in Florida, possibly in the care of relative. That's often the case that I think she was a widow on her own without children. So somebody may be needing care. So she did pass away in Florida. She wasn't living in Buffalo at the time of her passing. So sometime between 1977 and 2005 is when she lived in the Buffalo area.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a question. Do you have anything in the collection on Frances Folsom?
We do. I feel bad that we didn't sort of build her into this talk because we should have.
Yeah.
So we have pictures of her because she was amply photographed and her face appeared on a lot of product advertisements. So we have a few of those trade cards. We have photographs of her. I think we have a few letters, and now I can't remember if they are originals or if they are photocopies. So we have a few letters, and I think they are from her her second, her basically later in life when she married again to a Mr. Preston. So I think the letters are from later in life after Grover Cleveland passed away. We have a few pictures of their children as well. So some of the family photos of their homes. So yeah, we do have some material on Frances Folsom, plus again, another ready reference folder of clippings and articles about her.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, here's someone telling us who the stone is. Thank you. It's their child, Ruth, who died young. Oh, because I was staring at this photo. I was like, who is that? I couldn't make it.
Oh, wait, what is this?
The
Oh, I
stone
see.
the tombstone on the far side in that photo is Ruth Cleveland, the child of Grover and Frances, who died young. Yes, also known as Baby Ruth. Yeah, that's who that was. Thank you.
So where is the 12th district in New York?
Oh my goodness.
Do you know?
Somewhere in the New York metropolitan area.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know that. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Oh, that's good. It's a good, at least we can.
Yes, it's Stump the Librarian.
Do you have any info about Maria Halpin in the collection?
Oh, yeah. So Maria Halpin, that's the story of the woman who bore a child in 1874 named Oscar Folsom Cleveland, if I have this right, because I gave a walking tour right to talk about all this. So Maria Halpin said that Grover Cleveland was the father, and other people rallied around Grover Cleveland's supporter and said, oh no, he really only took the rap because really it was a married man who was the father of that child, and he wanted to protect his friends. So was he the father? Was he not? Book came out around 2012 arguing that Grover Cleveland was the father. He knew he was the father, and in fact, that the pregnancy resulted from sexual assault. So that's what one person is arguing most recently. So we have a couple of photocopies from the whole scandal when that came out in 1884, some written in her defense. So we have a couple of sort of short documents like that. Again, another folder of articles I collected, because when I got here at the museum, I realized we really don't have a lot on this whole scandal. It's kind of like the museum paid no attention back in 1884. We're just not going to gonna bypass this whole thing. So I looked around and got photocopies of some literature from the period so I can kind of flesh that out and start looking for articles on her. So clippings articles, what we have on her, and then there's the book and the title, which has gone right out of my mind, that came out several years back. I'm sure it's still in print. What else?
The last, it's more of an opinion. Do you think we really can claim Grover Cleveland? You know, it seems like he kind of used Buffalo as a stepping stone. What do you think about that?
Well, right, because he wasn't born here.
Yeah.
He had a meteoric career here. He retired elsewhere, buried elsewhere. I kind of have this joke. Who was the first Buffalonian to occupy the White House? People go, Millard Fillmore. Nope, wasn't born here. Grover Cleveland. Nope, wasn't born here. It was Frances Folsom. So since he had the most dynamic part of his career here, sure, we can claim him. We can do that. I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and then so yeah, the other aspect that's is just more of a note that's in the chat is that the Baby Ruth candy bar coming from the child name.
A Halloween classic.
Yes. So I thought
little fun size Baby Ruths.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. We covered pretty much all of that, and I think we're good. So thanks everybody.
Okay, thanks you all. Thanks for coming, and I hope you go out and enjoy this beautiful day while there's still daylight.
Yes, of course. And yep, and we'll see you next time. Just as a reminder, we're going to post this online on our YouTube page at the Buffalo History Museum. So If you missed it or you know somebody that wants to watch it, don't worry, it's going to be up, and I'm going to send the link to all the people who have registered. So,
And I will.
anyways, everybody have a good night. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. So long.